So welcome everybody to the Let's Be Frank diversity discussion. So today we're going to attempt to answer some of your questions around diversity and inclusion. I'm chair for today. My name is Joanna Obey and I'm the CEO of Shine Media. I'd like to thank our supporters today, being the CDN and the National Union of Journalists. And I'd also like to thank our panellists. So I'm joined today by David Riley, here to my left, who is a broadcaster and journalist. Joyce Adeloye Adams, who's a diversity lead for television at the BBC, Faraz Osman, who is the managing director of Lemonade Money, and Tamara Howe, who is the controller for business, comedy and entertainment television at the BBC, and also chair of the talent schemes here for Edinburgh. Right. So I'd like to make this session as interactive as possible. So at the end of our discussion, I will come to the floor for questions. So feel free to get involved. So first of all, I'd like to ask the panel, why is it important that we create a diverse TV industry? And I think I'm going to start with you, Faraz.
Because it's Britain, and Britain's quite diverse, and that's quite a good thing, I think. But I think that my main thing around it is that we're storytellers, and our job is to tell good stories that are new and feel like you're not recounting things that have been said before. And I'm of the opinion, and I would question anybody who would argue it, is if you had 5 people in the room that all came from the same background and did the same thing and had the same experiences, you're not going to get any new story. You're just going to get the same perspective, and that's not interesting and that's not exciting. And I think that once I've been in rooms where there's been a mix of opinions that have led to new ideas, and that's when it's most valuable. And I think that if we can get that right, then everybody benefits, because the Great British Bake Off, yes, it's a very British idea, but when Nadia wins it, she wins it with a different take on what bakery is. And if we just had the same people baking the same cakes every week in, week out, you're not going to get 11 million people watching that. So that diversity of thought and idea and opinion working within companies as well as working on screen just means that we just get better stories, and that's good content.
And Joyce, you mentioned earlier that and obviously it's a value at the BBC, that it's not just diversity, it's also about inclusion.
Yeah, I've always been under the impression that you can't have one without the other. I think people make the mistake of thinking that the two are exactly the same thing, and they're completely different things, although they're linked. Just to pick up on what Faraz said, I think it's about compelling storytelling, but I also think it's about staying relevant. I think we are viewing content. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about it over the last couple of days about how we're viewing content, and we're viewing it in a much different way to when I was growing up and you had 3 channels or 4 channels, and we've got several hundred now. And if you talk to my 4-year-old and my 7-year-old, they know at that age what they like to see on screen. They will just go to what they like. If they don't find it on one channel, they go to Amazon, they go to Netflix, and that is the future essentially. And if we don't reflect our society on screen, people are just going to go elsewhere and we will just become irrelevant. So for me, I think as well as providing compelling stories, I think it's also about ensuring that we stay relevant and, forward thinking.
Okay, well, I'd like to put some research to you all that I found. So in a recent study that was done in New York at the Center for Talent Innovation, it found that companies with diversity were 45% more likely than those without to have expanded market share, and 70% more likely to have captured a new market. In another research report that was done by Deloitte in 2012, it identified an 80% improvement in business performance when levels of diversity and inclusion were high. Tamara, do you think that the industry is aware of the added commercial value that diversity and inclusion brings to the industry?
Yeah, I think most people are smart enough to work that out. I think where we struggle is how to get that diversity. Just to Faraz's point earlier, if you have a homogenous workforce, there's a danger of groupthink, and in a creative industry that lives or dies through its innovation, that's a real danger. I don't think people yet realise what a serious issue it is yet, though. I don't think people are seeing it as survival. for me, it feels business critical as opposed to a bit of a nice to have. And I think people still think it's quite a way off. And actually, the speed at which the audience is shifting, the speed at which the world is changing, and we're becoming much more global in our outlook and in the things we look at and watch out. Those who don't keep up with that will be the business that fall by the wayside. And that sort of stuff can happen really, really quickly. And we've seen it in other industries where businesses have fallen off a cliff, whether that's, Encyclopedia Britannica, who didn't quite wake up to the CD-ROM. It can happen really rapidly. So I think we know it's important, but we're just not realising how urgent it is. Just a thing to add on the earlier question, I think having telling compelling stories is really important, but I think authenticity is really key as well. So it's about who's telling those stories. It doesn't always have to be a Muslim telling a story about Muslims, but having a mixed team where people actually understand, live, have the experience, the first-hand knowledge, really makes a difference to those voices and those subjects, because there's nothing worse than seeing diversity done badly. So.
And do you think, and I'll ask you for this one, that some businesses maybe think that having a sort of D&I team, a diversity and inclusion team, is a nice to have? Do you think it's a nice to have, or do you think it's imperative?
And so I run an indie called Lemonade Money. We're still fairly small. The content that we make is more youth skewing. So the nature of that means that we're attracting a more diverse workforce, because it's actually, when you look at the demographics, the younger you go down it, the more and more diverse you get as part of people that are interested in this. And in addition to that, because we make a lot of music content and youth skewing content, that attracts that sort of workforce, because music in this country and worldwide is incredibly diverse, and so we're having lots of people come through our doors wanting to make the content that we make, which is, I guess, it makes this job a little bit easier when it comes to kind of diversity and inclusion. I actually don't know if there's an ongoing argument when it comes to particularly, I'm brown and I'm Muslim, and I think anybody on this panel gets given a job because they're brown or because they're disabled or because they're gay, that's not what they want. I haven't met anybody that said to me, I really wish that I would be given an opportunity because I'm black. It's like, that's silly. They want to be given an opportunity because they're good. And the problem that you have is that once you try and create too many schemes, once you try and do too much affirmative action, you get into a little bit of a weird bubble where where people and individuals don't know if they've got the job because they're good at their job, or if they've got their job because they're diverse. And that's a problem as well. We need to ensure that we're uncovering the best talent no matter where they come from. And that can be from any background. And then celebrate them for how good they are at their job, not how diverse they are.
And David, I wanted to ask you, in your experience in applying for a number of different schemes that you've mentioned to me, in order to come into the industry, do you feel that businesses are authentically trying to access individuals with a disability, or do you feel that that's something they're seeing as a nice to have?
I feel that they're trying to access diversity, they're trying to access disabled people. And I do believe it's genuine, but the way that they're executing, the way it doesn't always equate to the final. They always don't always get to what they're trying to achieve. I think the mood is there, and I think people are genuine in that they want to tap into disabled talent or whatever. But without doubt, there has been good schemes and good moves towards including a more diverse workforce. But it still needs work to actually make it happen, in my opinion.
I mean, I would agree on that. I would say, and I would say that I'm really proud of all the schemes that the BBC are doing. We do a lot, and I think, a lot of them are very effective. I look after the assistant commissioning scheme, and, they have been amazing. We've also been part of the CDN commissioning scheme, which, Asif is here today, and I think Fatima is there. I'm going to point them out, and they've contributed amazingly to our slate of programs, just from having a completely different perspective, which I think is really important. And I think we recognise that. And one of the things we have moved towards around our schemes is anonymised CVs. And Catherine Hearn, who's at the back there, and DI, who lead on it, it's been incredibly successful. And I think, just taking away that unconscious bias through having, anonymised CVs, I think is really important. And I think for us, I think that's a big step change in the right direction. And eventually we would like to see that anonymised CVs for all jobs at the BBC. I mean, that is what we're pushing for.
Okay, well, I want to go back to a little bit more research. In a Deloitte study, they referred to a phrase called only skin deep, and it said that in a 2011 report, it's not enough to create a corporate version of Noah's Ark, bringing in a two of each kind. There is a clear argument for actively managing diversity rather than assuming we will naturally derive the benefits. I would ask you, Tamara, whose role do you think it is to manage diversity and inclusion within the workplace?
Well,
does it fall on one person?
I think it falls on all of us. I think at first, someone doesn't agree.
That would be me.
I think it falls on all of us. My personal preference would be that you do not need an inclusion team. Sorry, Joyce, but that would be my personal preference, and that the leadership of the organisation owns it, and those people who have power of hiring people own it. Because we take other targets on and we deliver them. And why can't we be tasked with doing the same around diversity? But the reality is we're not there at the moment, right? So I'd like to move out of schemes territory sooner rather than later, but we're not there. So we need to be interventionists. But without the leadership behind it, and I mean really behind it, not lip service, talking real action and results, and Diamond, which has been launched, which will measure how we're doing. I think we need to be held to account on these things. So yeah, I think it falls to all of us, but it also falls to the people who are in positions of power and influence to deliver.
And how about yourself, as obviously owning an independent production company, you're getting commissions. Who do you think is responsible for making sure that the industry becomes a bit more diverse?
I think once you start pointing fingers and say it's their fault or it's their fault or it's your fault, I'm not pointing you down, sorry. But once you start pointing fingers, that's not useful for anybody. I think that the reality of what's happening now is that we've been having this discussion for a while, and I think we've had these panels for a while, and I think that everyone's come to the agreement that diversity is a good thing for business, it's a good thing for storytelling, it's a good thing for content, it's a good thing for audiences. Everybody pretty much agrees with that. And when you come to Edinburgh, there are, look, let's not make any illusions about it, there are some people that aren't the nicest people in the world that work in this industry, but the vast majority of people that work in this industry are interested in making the best sort of stuff, and they're interested in working with new people and doing what they can to find those people. And I think that once we can all work together in making that happen, then it's going to work. But I kind of have said for a number of times that it is the responsibility of us as programme makers to bring the best ideas to the market and say, why don't you try this, why don't you try this, why don't you try this? As much as it is those broadcasters and those commissioners to come to us and say, we'd really like with you. This is a two-way market, it's a two-way street. And we need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to give them the best stories. And again, like I said earlier, not be commissioned or employed because of our diversity, but be commissioned and employed because we're bringing the best new content to screen, because that's what everybody wants.
Okay, and in yesterday's session, run by the CDN, they made the title was A Little Less Conversation and More Action. What action do you think needs to happen internally to start to see some of the change? Because Faraz is quite right, we have had these debates some time and time again. What is the actual thing that needs to happen now internally, Joyce?
How did I know you were going to come to me? Anyone who knows me knows that I'm very action-focused. I think I've been in the industry long enough to know that we need to actually take some action now. And actually, I think most people would agree that there has been a shift change. I think the conversation is different now. I think everybody, as you said, understands that, you know, diversity is good for business, it's good for telling stories, it's good for all those things that make up a really good programme or series. What we're doing at the BBC is one of the things that I recognised, and this has gone way back from when I was working with John at Pact, is that it needs to start with the commissioners. They need to take ownership, as well as the indies, as well as our senior leaders, and you know, and Charlotte recognises that also. And we've been working closely with the genre heads and the commissioners and our indies. One of the first things that I did when I started was hold consultations with our suppliers to understand what are the key barriers. You know, what should we be doing as broadcasters to help you help us, sort of thing. And I think that's really important, that, as you said, we're not pointing fingers, that we are working together. And from that, we've made changes to our spec. So, you know, from the beginning of October, all suppliers now will have to outline through the EdSpec what measures they're taking to increase diversity both on and off screen. That conversation also needs to be had with the commissioner, so they have ownership of that also. So we're making sure that conversations are being had at the very start of the creative process, not at the beginning or the end, you know, where people try to shoehorn it in, and so it becomes much more of a box ticking exercise. So we want it, you know, we don't want to be too prescriptive, because we understand that each genre is different and each production is different. But I think if everybody does their bit, then we'll see a change over time, but it will take time.
Do you think that, so in my experience speaking to talent managers, often, you know, they are tasked with I guess, expanding their talent, their access to different talent, and I guess being a much more accessible organisation. But do you think that businesses know how to tap into that talent? Because something that's always, you know, kind of a bite back to me, I guess, would be we don't know where to find our senior talent. We don't know where to find diverse talent. So do you think that they've been educated enough around where they can go to source that talent?
I guess that's it's a question for all of us, I guess. I think the problem with our industry is that we've relied too much on word of mouth recommendations. So our pool, from what we know, our networks are quite small. And I think as a result of that, over time, over years, over decades, you know, we don't know where to go because we rely on the same people over and over and over again. You know, and I think we're starting to have honest conversations about that now. And it was launched yesterday at the CDN. You know, I think the pan-industry database for talent would be really helpful for those indies who want to tap into new networks to go and get support via that database. And also, you know, I'm always at the end of a phone, or, you know, but I think we need to sort of be less casualized, I think. I think we need to start advertising jobs. I mean, these are all just really simple things, but I think if we don't do that, we're never going to expand our networks. And again, I think anonymized CVs are a way forward also for that. So you're really judging somebody on their experience and talent rather than because they're a drinking buddy or whoever.
I think there's something also, particularly one of my sort of passions is, because there's no one silver bullet, is getting people in positions of power and influence, because we're really good at the entry level, seriously lacking at the top. Yeah. And because we've been so poor at it, there aren't lots of people sitting there with that experience, right, in the wings, because you can't argue both cases. So we have to be more creative and think laterally about how we hire people and maybe redefine what we think success criteria is. Because if diversity of thought, ideas, authenticity is of a premium, then, you know, that may count for more than whether they've done X, Y, and Z on their CV. I know when Channel 4 was first launched, they did a lot of creative hiring to get people into positions in commissioning who had maybe never made programmes before, but had the credibility around their subject matter. So I think sometimes we need to be a bit braver. I know the current climate, you know, pressure for success means that people can be more risk averse, but I think we need to be bold if we're going to put people in positions of seniority and not wait for another 10 years for that runner who we got through on the talent scheme to come up to that level.
Okay, well, I want to just look at some of the statistics that came up in the CDN session yesterday. Now, and this is obviously recorded data. This is just reflective of recorded data. So it said, yesterday it was said that lesbian and gay individuals are just 1% of the overall TV population. And I believe even less for those that are transgender. So I'd like to just play a video of Addison, who is the network coordinator at St Mungo's for the lesbian, gay, transgender and bisexual network there. So if we could play that video. So I wanted to, well, I asked Addison to share that video with us because when I met him, he had a lot of views around this. And I know Addison's view is just his view, and obviously we can take some learnings from it, but there will be a lot of other education that's needed, I would imagine, to get to know all the different ways that we can make sure that our workplace is inclusive. What investment do you think needs to be made by the channels, production companies, to ensure that when somebody does come into the business, they are made to feel welcome, supported, comfortable? Should I start with you, Dave?
I think it's important to have somebody whose remit might be to oversee that, and I'm sorry. Excuse me. And in an ideal world, I think Tamara and I said, we wouldn't need, equality departments, so we wouldn't need them, but I think, at the moment we need these people, and we need champions and people who look out for to be there as a source of reference, both for the potential employee and the employer, and it's the same, just to pick up on, and forgive me for changing the subject, just to picking up on something I said a bit earlier on, it'd be great if we didn't have schemes and people weren't employed for whether they're trans or gay or LGBT or disabled. At the moment, however, we need these schemes, people rely because we're so underrepresented in the media, in entertainment, and so I think these still need to be in place, and we still need somebody within an organisation who can, I was going to say oversee, I don't know if that's the right word, but to be there as a point of contact and who be responsible for that.
And what barriers do you think that you have faced, David? Because I know you mentioned to me that you'd applied for a number of entry schemes and hadn't been successful.
I have applied for entry schemes, and it's difficult to say what's been the source of the difficulty, whether it's been a real difficulty or a difficulty in my head, which wouldn't be unusual. But just to give an example, there was one application where, as part of the application process, you were asked to make a YouTube video of yourself, and generally when I'm trying harder, or there's a camera on me, or a bit like now where I've got lots of faces looking at me, my movements become a bit more laboured, and I get a bit more nervous, I get a bit more blah, and it's just not the best. Or I feel it's not the greatest way for me to represent myself. And so that's just one. But I think the schemes are pretty in high demand anyway, and the fact that it's just at high demand, so they are required and they are needed. So at the moment, I hope they stay,
And to the rest of the panel, what investment do you think there needs to be around the education, like what some of the points Addison made?
I think education is key. I think training is really important. I think we discussed earlier about it'd be really interesting to find out how many senior managers or leaders within our organisations actually have had training in running a diverse team, for instance, you know, because I think you need to understand, you know, you need to have an understanding of the different sorts of people that makes up your diverse team, and what success may look like with each one of those individuals, rather than, you know, wanting everybody to just be clones of each other and you judging them on what your own idea of success is. And, you know, I think that's really important. And I know that at the BBC, I know Catherine and her team are looking at how we can make certainly our application process a lot more inclusive, because I think inclusiveness starts there, really, not just when you get people into the workplace. So we're looking at that. I think certainly from my perspective, we are rolling out unconscious bias training to all of our senior leaders. I would like to add that, you know, running a diverse team within that, if that's possible, but also disability awareness training. I think you know, a lot of people's nervousness about employing somebody who may have a disability is they haven't been exposed to it, and so therefore they feel really uncomfortable about saying the wrong thing, or, you know, I think you articulate yourself beautifully, you know, and, you know, I don't think, you know, I hope that, you know, that wasn't the reason why you got turned down. Hopefully, you know, if you go through our anonymous CVs, you know, that won't be the case. But, you know, I do think that, you know, a lot of our senior leaders do need training, you know, and they're creative people, you know, it's not something, you know, that they would automatically ask for, you know, so it is, I guess, people in my position, you know, in Catherine's position, and Tunde's, and even Charlotte's, to ensure that, you know, all our teams are, you know, are very clued up about, you know, unconscious bias, because I think that has a huge element on the kind of people that we hire, but also, you know, what they can say, and what, you know, their legal requirements are, and all of those things. It might sound a bit dull, but I think that's really an important part of creating a diverse team.
Okay, now I just want to go to Faraz and Tamara, because you mentioned earlier, Tamara, that there are lots of access points at entry level. There's lots of ways for individuals to come into the industry. But being probably one of the most senior women at the top level in the BBC, you know, how do you get there? How do we promote talent like yourself to make sure that you are able to, you know, sit at exec level and be in a position of influence? And Faraz, I'll come to you after.
Well, part of it is down to the individual as well, right? So you need to be good at what you do. I think you need to actively seek people out, give them exposure, whether sometimes that's through mentoring. A lot of people who do well in the industry, because the nature of it being a very relationship-focused industry, are people who have a sense of confidence, and so you've got to create those opportunities if people don't find it that natural for them. So a lot of people who may not be your average white middle class person in the BBC come in and then feel quite intimidated by the environment. So I think helping people to navigate their way around the system, and giving them a few shortcuts in terms of contacts, etc., is quite key. I think also recognising that people are different and allowing them to be themselves. You know, there is a sense sometimes that you have to leave who you are at the door, and that can be quite stifling. You're not at your best when you're trying to be something else, right? So I think allowing for that freedom of expression is interesting. I mean, I don't feel like I've ever had anybody standing my way, but I do feel like people have a perception of me which is different because I'm a black woman. You know, they say if a woman's tough, she's bossy, right? And if a man's tough, he's just tough. If you're a black woman, I find I'm always being referred to as scary. It's ever been thus, right? Why is that? And so I think it's that hasn't, now that if I was a different personality, I could have really shut myself down, and I would no longer be known for the person who's happy to tell it like it is and be authentic and true, right? So I think you need to give people space to be those, be who they are, because if you don't, you may as well have another white middle class woman in the room, because I'm not going to bring who I am to the table. So I think there is, you know, you need to give people the space to be who they are, because then I think when you and you got being who you are, you at your best, and that's when you'll excel. I think you need to help people, spot them, and help them navigate their way when they're feeling a bit nervous and intimidated and sort of slightly fish out of water in an environment. And then as an individual, you've just got to, you know, work bloody hard, be the best as you can possibly be, and, you know, when you get knocked down, get back up again.
I would agree with that. I haven't been at the BBC that long, people know that, and I think my first month was really tough, you know, and I'm quite a confident person, quite gobby, but, you know, I found it, you know, I remember one of the first meetings I went in, I walked out thinking I have no fucking idea what they were talking about. You know, there's all these different acronyms and everything else, and, you know, I had to go away and really swat up, and luckily, you know, people like Tamara were there, and, you know, Charlotte was there, who actually, you know, who really supported me. And I think, you know, I don't think I would have lasted as long as I did if I didn't have that support, because it is a big institution, and I think people are just getting on with their jobs, and everyone's really busy, and, you know, you just start, and it can be overwhelming, I think. And I think it's recognising that is the case when you bring, you know, people from different backgrounds into a big institution, that, you know, their reference points may be different, and they need that, you know, not support to actually, you know, get on and do their job, because hopefully they'll be good anyway, but in terms of just making them feel like they are being included, that they can be authentic and themselves without being judged.
And Faraz, obviously you were a commissioner as well, weren't you, at Channel 4 before then going off to
Yeah, I mean,
set up
I worked in the commissioning department at Channel 4 for a few years, but I think I would kind of, this idea of unconscious bias is fascinating, because it's a suggestion that it's happening just at a top level is I kind of think is not necessarily true. Even here at Edinburgh, you know, we've all seen it. And I've been guilty of it myself. There's people been guilty about it, where it's a bit like, oh, they're people that look like me, and they kind of look like the same sort of age as me, and so I'm going to hang out with them. And then suddenly you're in the bar hanging out with lots of people that look like yourself, regardless if you're from an ethnic minority group or from any sort of community. And that's not. And I don't think that we should demonise that, because a lot of the time is that's useful. Like, you know, I want to talk to somebody, and it is unconscious bias, and I'm sure there's lots of people here that, for instance, are aware of the new Frank Ocean album, that when I look at you, I may think, well, I don't know if you do have listened to that. But there are people that I know have listened to that and have been excited about that, and I know I can talk to them about it, and I can talk to them on a level about it. And you know, that's you are very aware of that, and that's just kind of part of what you are as a human. You know, there are groups that you are drawn to naturally, and we shouldn't apologise for that. The difference is, when it comes to what we do in the media and we do in television, is that not only are we part of the unconscious bias, there is also a bias that we create that causes huge problems. You know, and without being another boring lefty, what's happened with the Brexit vote recently, you know, I would argue, the vast majority of why we are leaving the European Union is based on immigration, which is based on the fact that we've had newspapers hammering this idea that immigration is bad, they're here to steal your jobs, they're going to bomb the crap out of you, your children are unsafe. This has been going on for almost decades now, and we've got to a point where the populace have taken an opinion that immigration is bad, yet the facts suggest that immigration is a good thing. But the facts are, it's a little bit like what's that's being said in the American election at the moment, is that there's somehow a difference between what you feel and what is the facts. And actually what you feel is regarded as now as important as what the facts are. And that's a real problem, and it's a problem that's perpetuated by the industry that we all work in. So we have not just a responsibility to make sure that our workplaces are accessible and are encouraging environments, and we can encourage a workforce to be diverse because that's the right thing to do. We have an additional responsibility by the fact that what the content that is that we're making and what it is that we do as an industry, actually, whether we like it or not, has an impact to the whole nation, and makes them take decisions that can actually be fatalistic when it comes to what we're doing as a progression of as a country, or frankly as a population worldwide.
Okay, I want to give the audience an opportunity to ask you some questions. So I'll just have one last question for you. When would we say it's good, that diversity and inclusion, we're good, we're happy? What would it look like?
I won't be in a job anymore. You know, so sort of me, I mean, I think Shonda Rhimes said it, you know, she said, you know, I'm not diversifying TV, I'm normalising it. I think when we can stop talking about diversity and it just is, you know, I think that's when, for me, I think success, we're there, really.
David, did you want to add?
I still will be there when the TV and the media reflect the community that is there. You know, we live in a very diverse community, but up until now, the entire spectrum of that community is not always reflected in the media or in entertainment. I think, you know, we'll be getting pretty near there where it is reflected, and we don't have this conversation anymore because it just is, and we don't need equality departments, and we don't need schemes, and we don't need whatever.
Easy, Tiger.
And Tamara, Faraz, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree with these guys. You know, it's when it's become second nature and it's organic. The thing is, it will constantly be something that we're having to do. We constantly have to evolve and change. The population is constantly evolving and changing. The world is changing. So, you know, it's not like we're going to get to a point where we go, look around. Oh, look, we're all exactly. The telly's reflecting exactly what we've got out there, because what's out there is changing all the time. We need to be in a mindset where we accept change, we embrace it, and we're always, evolving and keeping up with the audience.
Yeah, I don't buy the argument that like it's an on-off switch. You know, I think that diversity has to be seen not as I don't buy into the argument that diversity is a problem that needs to be solved. Diversity is part of the conversation. You know, we're living in a situation now where I think 3 of our major channels are run by women. So what, should we just stop talking about women working in the media industry? Well, of course not. That's just what it is. We need to make sure that we're continuing to have this conversation, and whether or not people start getting bored of it, or if they feel like it's been heard before, it should always constantly be going on, because it's part of making sure that you're continuing to do that sense check, that you're reflecting the audience that you've got in front of you, and also that you're using it to your advantage, like I said earlier, to bring the best ideas to the fore. And so I don't like the idea that this conversation will go away. It shouldn't go away. We just need to move away from saying that diversity is a problem and start saying that diversity is something that should be celebrated.
Absolutely. Should we take some questions from the floor? Do you have any? Yeah, that's one just here.
Just got a question for the panel. I remember about 6 months ago talking to an AP that'd been on a diversity scheme, and she said to me, all that's happening is they're creating a bigger revolving door where more people will go in through schemes, go out again. And she felt herself personally that she'd not developed, because what happens is they go in, they go out. In terms of representation, it looks great because the figures are up. What do we do about the revolving? Do you recognise that there's a revolving door, and what do we do about that?
I've built my own revolving door. I started my own company, and you know, if you don't feel like you're getting the opportunities that you deserve, there are now 1,000,001 ways that we didn't have when we started out. Like, there were only very limited publishers out there that you had to ask for permission from, and that's not the case anymore. Like, if you feel like there's a gap in the market, and you feel like something's not being said and not being done in the right way, there's very little now to stop you from just cracking on and doing it yourself. Some of the biggest YouTubers in the world, people like Just Rain, and these are ethnic minorities, they're Sikhs, they're talking about Just Rain is a huge international phenomenon that's one of the most successful people on social media, and he's just doing it himself. And he doesn't have to always talk about what it means to be a Sikh. He just cracks on and kind of says, and has made his own path, and that's fascinating. But nothing stops anybody else in the room doing that, because we have now a pluralisation and a democracy of the media, which is a really positive thing.
I hear what you're saying, though, and I think it can be an issue, because we often see schemes as being the sort of the beginning, the middle, and the end, and actually that's not the case. And we should do more thinking about the longer term. So you get a scheme for an AP, then what? What do they do? How do you then help them get the next thing, whether it's within your organisation or outside of your organisation? I think we've done a scheme. we've sorted it. And actually, no, that's just a small part of the process. And so we need to, as employees, leaders, we need to have a solution that's a little bit more longer term.
Now, before we go to the next question, I did do...
Got more facts for us, have you?
No more facts. What I've done instead is I've done a takeaway for you all, where I've gone to the effort of researching and meeting with a number of organisations that attract diverse talent. So while the questions are going on, I'm just going to flick through some of the slides. So feel free to ask questions, but if you want to make notes of organisations where you can go back and source talent from after today, this is where you can do that. There was a question from Michelle at the back. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hi. Michelle Matheson, I'm a talent exec at Shiver and Label One. I agree about the revolving door, but I think there's a revolving door for talent full stop. I think that happens, you just keep the best people, and it's a really small group of people that move around. I think with schemes, yeah, we do really well, as Tamara said, with our sort of entry level, we do incredibly well. My big bugbear is series producers and producers, and at Shiver we've had 3 or 4 Black Asian series producers on our projects, and I'm not talking about Black-led films or Asian-led films. I'm talking about things like Gino DeCampo or Katie Price. So we've had a real mixture of people working on our series, but that's partly because I'm there, and as much as anything is, I'm there, I see what's going on, I can influence, and I think that's part of what I think Tamara has also mentioned is about we need more people in those sorts of positions, because everybody, if they could, would. I don't think there's this sort of, I don't want that person because they're not, I don't want a diverse person in my organisation. No one's going to say that, and no one really means that. I think people want to have the best people, be they diverse or not, but I just think that if you don't constantly have it on your agenda, it won't be there. If it's not constantly in your face, you're not going to see it. And the area that we fail at, I would say, is disability. So it could be that the Tower is a really not a great place for somebody who's physically disabled, but then there are people who are mentally disabled who we have to work with, who we work with, who we haven't got those skills to work with them. Does that make sense? So there are other courses that we, as the sort of commissioning, talent, controllers, we all have to go on to recognise that. So I just think entry level's great. Series and senior people, I think, is the one that we really need to work on.
I mean, I would agree with that. I think we do quite well at entry level. One of my missions, as it were, is to diversify the commissioning teams. I think, as I said before, I think our assistant commissioning team has helped some way, and I'm hoping if there are jobs available that they feel empowered to apply for those jobs and hopefully get them, and we're doing it again. I know that Fatima, some of the shows that one particular show that she's looked on, which was about a series about Muslims, is that she insisted that the team, or certainly the people that were leading the team, were also Muslims, to ensure that the content was as authentic as it could be. And I think, I think having people in those senior roles, I think will trickle down the food chain, as it were. So we hopefully will get series producers who are black and brown or disabled, because we have people who can influence those decisions.
Brilliant. One more question at the back.
Hi there. I mainly work in specialist factual, and a big bugbear I have is that it mainly focuses on 2 wars. What can be done to, what do you think that can be done so that this can be diversified, this field can be diversified? I'm making a short film about sort of Caribbean people in Scotland, and that's just one thing. But how can then this be pushed to the big channels so that people know more about the history of people that have been here for hundreds and hundreds of years?
I think coming up with compelling stories and a fresh way in that can depend. Obviously, it depends on which channel you're going for, but that can speak to that channel and that audience is one way. I think the kind of pressure on the commissioners at the moment and the channels is not just about hiring people, it's also about changing what they produce, that reflects the audience. So I think now is probably a good time to start doing that kind of thing. If you're slightly marginalised and you don't know how to get that kind of access, I think partnering with an established indie that has a track record in that kind of thing would help as well. But I think stories normally, good stories, well told, with that are sort of tailor-made to the particular audience you're trying to sell to or channel, is one way in.
I agree. I think, in terms of specialist factual, I think we're doing quite a lot that don't focus on the two wars. We've got the Black and British season, which is coming up, and we're doing the partition season also. And we've also got the fund that can support ideas with diverse content or with diverse talent attached. So we are very passionate about getting those stories to screen. So I slightly disagree with you when you say that, we just focus on the two wars. I think there's a lot of other quite important stories that we're telling.
But also finding ways of telling those stories, right? Because if you think, I don't know, you'll shoot me for this, but a lot of our specialist factual stuff is probably, this is BBC, is probably on BBC Two. Mm-hmm. I think we heard today the average audience, the age of the audience of BBC Two is, 62 was it, or 68? I can't remember. There's often a very traditional route into that subject, so finding fresh ways. Could you take some specialist factual history stuff into the BBC Three audience, for example? How would you tell those stories that would be compelling enough to get young Asian kids listening or young black kids listening? So I think, the genre itself, thinking about the genre itself and how you refresh that so that you can take it outside of the traditional BBC Two audience who may not be that interested in the subject that you want to share is another thing. No, I'm just talking.
No, I know. Yeah, but we can only talk about the BBC. I wouldn't sit up here and take up Channel 4.
I think there's one question this gentleman's had his hand up for a long time. We'll try and come to you and then we'll probably have to wrap up.
I'm Sam from Swedish Television, which is like the equivalent of the BBC. I was one of the first immigrant reporters on SVT about 20 years ago. And we've been counting heads on television, on screen, and among our staff for a very long time. Still, I feel not much happens. On my angry days, I call it the WOG count, because they look at the face. It's just a matter of color or hairstyle, or color of hair and things like that. But what I see after 20 years at SVT is just what you, Tamara, identified as the middle management, and people that come in, like me, very quickly become white, because the approach and the perspective stays. It's the same approach and perspective in most of the organization, and especially in the newsroom and current affairs departments. What do you, and I think it's the same thing, you actually talked about it, saying that people turn white and middle class after a while to
Not
adapt.
quite, but
No, but that's what I feel happens a lot. People with a diverse background come in, they feel they don't fit in because middle management, news editors, etc. are all white and they have their mindset. And then if you don't fit in, you either adapt or you leave. What can we do to address that? Because I think that is a problem that is big.
Well, there's a few things about that. What I would say is that I don't think anybody fits in. I think every single individual feels like there's a thing that they have about them that doesn't quite fit with the person that they're sitting next to, and that's what I mean by that needs to be celebrated rather than challenged. The reality is that everyone, to give an example with I know it's an aged example now, but with what happened on Strictly Come Dancing, where you've got an all-white panel with all-white presenters. And yes, they have some diversity in the contestants. That's kind of across the board. You know, you generally see talent shows where you've got an all-white panel judging a diverse set of contestants, and that doesn't feel, you know, we don't know if we're okay with that. But when the BBC tried to challenge that and they put Alicia Dixon on a judging panel, suddenly they get accused of ageism. And it's like, oh, well, by changing that diversity problem, you created a new diversity problem. And this is the issue that we've got to be careful that we don't get into. Because as soon as we start kind of pitting people against each other and diverse groups against each other, saying, you come to your problem, it's a bit like, well, do we get to a point where everyone just has to be homogenous? They may look different, but they all have to feel like white and middle class. Well, no, because as soon as we do that, we just create a whole new set of problems, which is we're not celebrating the diversity we have and creating the best situation.
I think you misunderstood me, because the problem is that
You've got it already.
people kind of just adapt instead of celebrating the diversity because of middle management, news editors, etc., you know, not adapting to a more diverse reality.
But I think that the solution to that, though, is to create an environment that's not adaptable. So as soon as you can create an environment where there isn't one thought process, there isn't one style, and actually there's a mix of styles and a mix of approaches and a mix of opinions, that means that people, and I'm not just saying that because we should do that because for a business reason or an ethical reason or anything like that. I'm purely saying it from a creative reason. If you have a whole workforce that have all adapted and homogenised and are thinking in the same way, regardless of what they look like, you're just going to stall when it comes to being a creative company. It just doesn't go anywhere. So I would argue that the market would almost correct it, because as soon as you have that as an industry and you have a production company or a channel that is all doing the same thing day in, day out, nobody's going to watch it anymore because it's not saying anything interesting or new or fresh. Also,
I would say that it has to come from the leadership, and you need to stop calling it the wog count. I know, but I don't think that's very inclusive. But do you know what I mean? Yeah.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there because we've run out of time. So can we give a round of applause to our amazing panel? Thank you so much.